Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome back, or welcome back to me. I haven't seen you all or chatted with you all in quite some time. I am Rosalind Brown of Your Wealth Guidance, where we provide actionable insights for Black women so you can live your life on your own terms. I'm so happy to see y'all again. I took off for the month of May so I can spend some time living my life on my own terms. I celebrated my birthday, did a little traveling, and just got a chance to breathe. And so I'm really happy that like our first speaker, our first interview as we are coming back is Daphnée. And we're in the midst of this crazy time of work where we're hearing layoffs, which I always think one interesting thing about layoffs, if you look at some of our past videos, a lot of the people that we've interviewed and talked to, what spurred them was like some type of job loss, a layoff, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden things change. So some people might be feeling antsy about that, but then it's also the whole return to work. And some people are like, listen, I ain't trying to go back. I ain't trying to go back full time. I ain't trying to go back part time. I ain't trying to go back 2 days a week. And so I was chatting with Daphnée, who is a New York City native turned globe-trotting digital nomad and sometimes expat. And I love it because one, I was like, I didn't even know there was a difference. Like I would think to use them like interchangeably. But since 2019, she's lived in Vietnam, Panama, Peru, and currently calls Argentina home. What I think is funny is, starting in 2019, no one knew what would happen in 2020. So to kind of hear how that experience shaped things as well. And so Daphnée immerses herself in the culture tapestry of each city by exploring the local cocktail culture and indulging in the award-winning gastronomic delights that define each destination. I love it. That's like my favorite part of travel is food.
It's my
eat my way through all the countries. Hey, from lack to legacy. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. And so Daphnée, I think the first question is like, how did you get here? So how did you get to the 2019 to say, all right, I'm done. I'm leaving. This is my year.
Hi everyone. Thanks for joining. So it was a long time coming. I want to say this was like 10 years, a decade in the making. I knew I wanted to leave, but there was this fear that, and also this, I didn't really know how I could make that possible because I thought the only way that I can achieve my dream of like living overseas was to either marry someone overseas or to have a job that transferred me overseas. So I was actually was doing both routes because at some point I think I went to Paris for like 2 weeks trying to find a husband just so I could like live in Paris.
Like, husband, where you at?
Right. So I went that route, but I also went the route for work where I even had a job where they had an office in Paris. And I worked there that was like my second trip to Paris. But I was seeing that it wasn't as easy for me to just transfer to another company because, I mean, they already had their employees in France and they were working with French clients. So it wasn't as easy. So I had to like figure out would I just stay in the US forever, which I know that's not what I wanted to do, or do I just find another way? And what sparked the idea of like being able to do it. So instead of me like moving to Paris, which if you think about it, in terms of cost of living, it's comparable to NYC. And in my mind, if I worked for a company in Paris, I'd be able to afford that living. When I went to Thailand, and we were just talking about this, I had 10 days. And I'm laughing because 10 days in Asia right now sounds absurd. Like the idea of going to flying all the way from the US to go to Asia for 10 days. I can't believe I did that. But at the time, to me, that was like a lot of days. And living there and like being there for 10 days, I went there with a friend and just seeing how everything was so inexpensive. And I was basically able to like live in the lap of luxury for cheap, compared to like if I were to go to like Miami. We talked about that too. Total difference in terms of cost of living. So that stayed in my mind, right? I said, there has to be a way I can like live like this. I just didn't know how to make that work. And then I stumbled across the book 4-Day Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And there is a section in the book where he, I believe he coined the term, but I'm not entirely sure. I think he coined the term, but I can get back to you on that. And it's called Geoarbitrage.
Yeah.
And that term, what that term is saying is that you can take so in my case, it would be US dollars, earn US dollars, but then live in a country where the cost of living is relatively less. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, I could totally live in Thailand. And I think it was around that time. I don't remember the timing, but at one point I quit my corporate job. I said, I chucked up the deuces, and decided to like work for myself. And the only reason I was emboldened to do such a thing is because the job that I had before was they had unlimited paid time off, meaning no one's tracking how many days I take off as long as I get the work done. Of course, I was abusing the hell out of that. But with me abusing that, because just because I decide to go to Thailand or wherever doesn't mean the work is going to stop. So because I was abusing it, I found myself working while I was on vacation just to keep up, because I was going somewhere once a month, but the work needed to be done, right? So with me working while I'm like on a beach sipping on a cocktail or whatever, I'm like, wait a minute, I could work anywhere. I don't need them. So I quit the job, and I had 2 clients at the time. And to me, I took a huge pay cut though, because the 2 clients was not giving me the salary that I was getting in New York. But for me, at that point, I just wanted the freedom to just work wherever. So that was fine for me. And then I remembered how cheap Thailand was. So I was like, okay, I can just like go somewhere and work with the salary that I'm getting there. So that's kind of how that started. My me starting the digital nomad life. In terms of the expat life, that happened because of the pandemic. Once the borders are shut, I can't go. I can't go anywhere.
Roam around.
Right. So the first country that I started off my like official digital nomad journey was in Vietnam. I left in March 2019, and I booked a one-way ticket. And I'm very random. So like, if you're going to ask me questions related to like, how did you plan? How much money did you save? I'm not the person to give you that answer, because I fly by the seat of my pants. It was like, I booked my one-way flight maybe 2 weeks prior to leaving to Vietnam. So it was just like, I was okay, guys, I'm leaving. I don't know when I'm coming back. I told my mom I would be gone for like a year. She wasn't happy about that. My stuff was already in storage, because at that time I was like bouncing around. So I had already decided I was going to leave, but I didn't know like which country I was going to leave to, because I kept leaving and coming back. I did a 6-week stint in Colombia, and then I ended up coming back. But this time I said, no, I don't know when I'm coming back. So I like just left. And because of the pandemic, I went from being a digital nomad in Vietnam, thinking that Vietnam would be my home base while I travel around Asia. And then the pandemic happened like 6 months later. So then I ended up being an expat for 2 years.
And see, that's one of the things. So in terms of like the difference between digital nomad, so digital nomad is just like roaming around, and expat is like just making a home. Like what is the, okay.
So yeah, so with an expat, and then of course there's a lot of legalities involved as well. So with an expat, there's visas, right? So every country has different visas. So if you're an expat, and if you're like a legit expat, you either have a work visa, or I mean, you don't even have to work and be an expat. You can be a retiree. You can be a retired person. There's different. Each country has their own like set of rules when it comes to visas. But if you're an expat, what that means is this is just going to be your home. You're expatriating from whatever your home country is. And in my case, that would be the US. So like somebody who's in Paris that decides to come to live in the US for work or marriage or whatever, they're considered an expat. I'm going to add this in real quick, because expat is really no different from the word immigrant, right? So there, a lot of people like to say, "Oh yeah, I'm," and they'll say, "Oh, but I'm not an immigrant." Yes, I'm an immigrant. Like if I'm staying in the country and my plan is to live because I want a better life than what I had before, you're an immigrant. So expat is just to me a gentrified version of being an immigrant.
I think that's a
So
really good point to make. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of people, they try to fight against it. I'm like, I like to say I'm a political refugee. I know. No, but a lot of people just, they just want to say they're an expat, but you're an immigrant. Because I meet so many people, or even in like the expat groups, and I'm pretty sure they're one of those people that do not want, Mexicans or other immigrants coming to the US, but they see no issue going to another country and basically doing the exact same thing. So there's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that point in there. So whatever immigrants are doing in the US, if you go to another country and do it, you're an immigrant as well as an expat. Now with a digital nomad, you're going to a country, but your plan is not to stay there long term. So some countries, and you don't even necessarily need a visa. Now, I mean, don't quote me. This is probably illegal. So I don't know who else is going to because of what happened with the pandemic, a lot of countries now are having digital nomad specific visas, right? Specific to digital nomads where you can stay a year, whatever. But before that, what people would do is they would look at each country's rules in terms of entry depending on your passport. So like this is an example. So like with Argentina, you can come as a tourist. So you get a tourist visa, and it's not like you get a stamp on your passport, like a specific visa stamp. It's just a regular stamp. But as a tourist, you're allowed to stay in the country for up to 90 days. So that's 3 months. So a lot of digital nomads, that's how they kind of work their way into like visiting different countries. So they'll stay for 3 months. So 3 months in Argentina, then they'll go 3 months in, say, Uruguay, and 3 months in Chile, the different countries. And so that's how they're able to be nomadic and not having to have the visa like for work or getting married or anything like that. So that's really it. Digital nomad. The real difference is in terms of your intention for staying and the length, how long you want to stay. But there's also slow mads, which is what I think I've transitioned into slow mad, because I'm realizing that 3 months at a time, I can't. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me, and I don't know if it's because of I'm about to be 42, so I think I just want a slower travel experience. So like staying 3 months and then going to another country for 3 months, I need like a month just the transition for me to going from one culture to a next. I need a month to kind of figure how everything is going. So the 3 months just doesn't work for me. So I'm transitioning into a slow mat. So, and with that, I've been in Argentina since March. So I'm starting off my 4th month in Argentina. And I plan to come back and make this my home for, I don't know, maybe a year or two. So slow mads live somewhere for 2 years and then they go to another. I say 2 years, but it can be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and go to another country.
I love it. Now, somebody said they wanted to hear more about Vietnam because she's in East Asia right now. So, how was your experience in Vietnam?
Vietnam was amazing. So, I was in central Vietnam. So I started off in Hoi An, and that's like a UNESCO site. And I eventually moved to Da Nang, which is maybe like a 35 minutes, like 40-minute taxi ride. But I found that when I was living in Hoi An is nice. It's like, think like rice patties. If you think about like the typical Asian like city, like countryside, that is Hoi An. So there was like rice paddy fields. They have an old town. It's more of a slower feel. And to me, it was great. And I like that slow feel, like slow way of living. But at nighttime, I'm trying to get it on and popping. Like I want to be where the action is, you know. So I found that I was always taking a taxi over to Da Nang, right? So I said, if I'm always in Da Nang, I might as well just live there. So that's how I ended up in Da Nang. And Da Nang is where it's like more like Miami, with the riding up the strip, and the beach is like right there. And there's like lots of hotels, coffee shops, a subdued version of Miami for sure. But the people were super friendly. What I found interesting, and I didn't realize this until I started like traveling around Latin America, is a lot more people in Vietnam speak English than, I guess I could use Panama, like than like a lot of the Latin American countries that I've been to. So in terms of language, like you don't need to learn Vietnamese to live in Vietnam. You can
Oh,
find your
wow.
way around. There are a lot more people because they learn it in school. So like in Panama, not a lot of people are speaking um, English. It's mostly like hotel, hospitality, service industry. They'll probably know English really well. But I found that when I was living in Panama, I took high school Spanish, right? But I always had my phone at the ready to translate something, because I knew that it was going to be difficult for me to find someone who can understand my high school Spanish. But in Vietnam, I didn't have my phone out like that trying to translate. There was always someone that can communicate with me. So don't let language barrier be an issue in like moving to Vietnam or any. I'm going to say Vietnam, because when I was in Korea, no, it wasn't like that. In English. That I had a hard time there because of the language barrier, but in Vietnam it was pretty easy, I think.
Now, is there a place that you've gone and you were like, this ain't for me. I ain't even gonna make it 90 days. Like, let me get up out of here.
No, however, Panama, my original plan was to stay there for a year. I left after 9 months. I didn't think it was for me. So that's like the one place that I know that I could not live in. And it's not because, and I think for me, it's more of a lifestyle, personality, what I want out of the place that I'm living, that it just didn't work for me. And one of the things I want to drive, like I want to drive home the fact that just because one person raves about a country, that doesn't mean you're going to like it. And the other way around. You really have to just like find out for yourself. Because I met so many, I mean, even the expats, they were Black expats, they loved Panama.
Oh yeah.
Loved it. And I'm sitting there like, you do? Okay.
Like, are you sure?
Like, it rains every day, y'all. You're okay with that? But what's interesting is when I was in Vietnam, a lot of expats from Thailand, specifically Chiang Mai, were in Vietnam, and they got like trapped. They were, because of the border shut. The border shut so like suddenly, no one really had time to prepare to go back to wherever because a lot of the expats came to Vietnam as like, remember I mentioned if you stay for 3 months, the way you get around that is basically stepping foot in another country and going right back to the other country, right? So like when I was in Vietnam, the first, and they call it visa runs, I went to Laos, and I mean, I didn't even see Laos. I just went to the border and they stamped my passport and took me right back, like all in a day. So a lot of the expats in Thailand, Chiang Mai specifically, they would come to Da Nang and for their visa run. But of course, they're making a trip out of it, right? Because you're flying, so you might as well stay a couple of days. And then the border shut. So a lot of them got stuck there. And I met a few of them who did not, they just couldn't wait to leave. They did not like Vietnam. And I'm like, what? So now I know how they feel because I was in Panama, confused about why people loved living in Panama. So
But I think, I mean, I think that goes back to like knowing your list. I can't remember who I was talking to, and they talked about like knowing your list. And so some people
mhm.
want a city, some people want to be by the beach, some people want to be someplace where it's never going to be cold. And so it really kind of depends. And so you got to find your list of what's going to work for you. For Lack the Legacy, she says, did you go to Ho Chi Minh City?
I did. I went to Ho Chi Minh once. Ho Chi Minh, honestly, because of Ho Chi Minh, I realized that I could stay in Vietnam forever. Because so I'm from New York City, so of course, like I want the city feel. And living in Da Nang, Ho Chi Minh is like a 30-minute flight away.
Oh, wow.
Definitely less than an hour. It's not that far. It's basically like flying to DC from New York. Um, and it was the hustle and bustle is there. Like it's funny because when I was in Da Nang, I was scared of crossing the street because the motorbikes don't care about. There's no passengers have the right of way. There's no such thing. You just have to find your way through the traffic. And everyone would laugh at me. They were like, "Girl, wait till you get to Ho Chi Minh. This is nothing," and they were absolutely right. It's like, whew, it's fast. It's fast. It's busy. One thing I did appreciate about Ho Chi Minh, though, because my first experience in Asia was Bangkok, and I was like, I don't like this because it was busy, loud, but also dirty and smelly. So Ho Chi Minh is busy, loud, but it's not dirty and smelly. It's like a sort of like an Asian cosmopolitan, like an Asian New York, I guess. That was the way I saw it. I was like, okay, I like this. Yeah.
And so I think that's a good point, but especially like on the journey. So you went from working the regular corporate job, and we talked about, when you're working corporate and you're trying to like take a vacation around each and every holiday and so forth. How
Mhm.
did you know, okay, this is time, but also like have enough confidence that I can make it? Because I think that's one of the things that holds people back. They're like, I got bills to pay.
Oh, so like financially, you mean?
Yeah. How did you like calculate?
Personality.
Yeah.
Well, the way I mean, I had savings. Like I don't know any. I mean, I'm sure there are some people that go with $1 and a dream and make it work. But I felt confident enough because I had like a decent amount of savings to where if and then of course I had a support system. Even though my mom wasn't happy that I left, I knew that if I came back, mom, I didn't make it, she would take me in. So that's why to me it was like, I'm just gonna figure it out along the way. But I kind of do that with everything in life. I mean, it took me 10 years because to me that was like a huge move, but like there are things that I just randomly do it and figure it out along the way. So I think the reason I felt emboldened to just like do it is because I had to say, and then I was already working remotely, so it worked for me. Yeah.
And then I know one of the big popular is like tech, and that's how people are like, okay, I can work from home if I'm in tech. What industry are you in?
Digital marketing. So I'm doing like paid search, and I've been doing for over a decade, so I can like do it with my eyes closed. And it was because I don't know if I mentioned this on the live recording or before, but because I had the unlimited time off and I saw that I can work efficiently while I was on the beach, I said, let me just do that. Yeah.
And so now going from corporate to working for yourself, you know, corporate is 40 hours a week, plus or minus. What are you doing now? Like, what's a normal week for you today?
So I have it set where I'm only taking calls from like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So for me, my weekend is Friday. Like I have a long weekend, so Monday and Friday. But then, of course, if there's like an emergency meeting or whatever, email, I'll still tend. But for me, I just say Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are like my hardcore work hours. It took me a while to get to that point. And when I first started working remotely, so like a lot of my friends, like, oh my God, you're so lucky you get to work remotely. I'm like, it's not everything that it's cracked up to be because when I first started doing it, I found myself like I didn't have 9 to 5, right? And even when I was working 9 to 5, I still found myself working from 6, 7, 8, whatever. But with this, it's like, oh, I don't have anyone to answer to. There's no like I'm giving myself a deadline, or so I'm not gonna log into my computer and answer that email until like noon. But then I found myself working at midnight. Like I had the parameters were off. Like I didn't have. It was crazy. It was crazy because I remember once I was doing that, and at the time my mom was like working. She's a teacher, and she would come home from work and find me taking a nap or whatever. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I can't have dinner. I have to work on this project. And it's like 8 p.m. And she said, I'd rather work from 9 to 5 and know my day is done. This is crazy. She would always like joke about that. And when the pandemic happened, now like almost all my friends are working remotely. And then I see memes coming up, and the memes are talking to exactly what I used to complain about, and when I was telling them that it's not what it's all cracked up to be. But I've made it to the point where I just work Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and so I can like spend the rest of my time enjoying whatever city I'm in.
Now, how are you adjusting to like the time difference? Because I'm assuming some of your clients might be over here and spread out. How do you work with people, especially in those different time zones, so you aren't talking on the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning or something?
That was my life in Vietnam. I don't like it. I don't like it. So when I was in Asia, I had clients in the US. So I would, hang out with friends at like 7 p.m., whatever, have drinks. And then, okay, guys, I gotta go because I have to start working at 9, 10 p.m. or whatever. And that was hard. That was hard for me. It's not easy. I wouldn't do it again. Maybe I would do it again with the 3 days, like the way that I set up my days now. But back then it was really hard. And then going to bed at like 5 a.m.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's not. But I think it's easier if you're in Latin America or even in Europe, because they're like 5 hours ahead. So then the latest you'll probably work is like 9 p.m. Then you have, if you want to
The rest
go
of the
out.
night.
But if you think about it, if you're living there, that's good, because whatever errands you have, if you want to go grocery shopping or doctor's appointments or whatever, you can take care of that during the day, and then you work, and then you have your evenings free. In Argentina, I'm an hour ahead right now, so it's not much
It's
of a
not
difference.
that
It's fine.
bad.
Yeah,
Now,
it's fine.
someone says she loves this. She wants to do it, but she's scared. What would you say to someone who says, I really want to, but I'm scared?
What are you scared of? That's what I need to know first. What's the fear?
So tell us what you're scared of.
Right.
And this is another question. And I think every time we have this discussion, we get this question: how do you handle medical?
Medical, you said?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when I was in Vietnam, because right now, even though like I have clients where I work for myself, but I also have projects that I work with an agency that places me in projects. So I do get insurance from them. So whenever I'm back in the States, I go to my doctors. But when I was in Vietnam, I had insurance. So you can like, they have Nomad insurance, right? And I had the insurance, and I remember going to the doctor, and that was another thing that said, I'm never going back. Because I went to the doctor, and the way it works, if you're doing like insurance overseas, is you have to pay up front and then file a claim, and then they reimburse you. It was so cheap. Like I didn't even need insurance. You don't even need insurance. So it depends on the country. I haven't really looked into it like I know that you can buy into an insurance here, and it's not as expensive. So I don't have the details specifically for Argentina, but I know in Asia, specifically Vietnam, like I think I paid $200 for a full physical, and like all the just everything. I paid $200,
Yeah.
and you know how in the U.S. you go to your primary care physician, and let's just say um, something's up with, I don't know. Let's say you need a mammogram or something. They need to do an ultrasound or whatever. You have to get a referral, right? And then make an appointment and go. That doesn't exist in Vietnam. I'm speaking to Vietnam, but I feel like it's the same across the board in Asia and maybe other countries. I think that's just American bureaucracy crap. I remember thinking, oh, I have to go to this. I got my first mammogram in Asia. I have to go to another. They would no, just go to the third floor. Everything is in the same. So there's no like red tape. It's none of that. Everything is easy.
Oh my gosh. I think that's now Dia's agreeing with you. She said she was remote for years and her friends always assumed she was at home chilling until the pandemic.
Right.
And everybody else was sitting there, working every hour of the day. Now, somebody talks about she's concerned about meeting weirdos. There's so many horror stories about kidnapping. Y'all know people get kidnapped right here in the good old
I just hope this person is commenting from the US.
I'm assuming so, yes. Tell us where you
Now, there's a lot of weirdos in the US. I'm trying to think. For me, and I think because like I've been solo traveling for over a decade. So even before I became a remote worker, I'm now seeing all the comments. I wasn't clicking on the right thing. So before I came a remote worker, I was already traveling solo. So that wasn't the hurdle for me, like meeting weird people, because I've already traveled alone. And so I haven't met any like weirdos. You still have to keep the same wits about you that you would back home. It might be like a huge culture shock if you're like coming from, I don't know, Idaho, where, but if you're coming from like a coastal city, like a major city in New York, you have enough wits about you that you can make your way around. The only problem would be is if like the language barrier. So that's something you'd have to like figure out and like make your way around. But other than that, I think the weirdest thing that happened to me was I went for a run and this guy was just he said something crazy. I'm like, I didn't even know they did that. I didn't even know they catcalled here. So, and this was in Asia. But the weirdest experience that I've had traveling wasn't even when I was a nomad. It was when I was a regular traveler, and this was in Morocco. No, I'm lying. Yes, Morocco. Yes, the men are crazy. They're very aggressive and like in your face. But when I was in Dubai, right, that was like my first time and only time experiencing like sexual harassment. So
oh no, did we lose
other
her?
than that, no.
See, and they from Florida and New York. Come on, y'all. Look at them Florida stories.
Listen, anyone who's on this show and wants to be able to like, do like either a digital nomad or whatever, I have no problem being like you have any questions, like I can answer the questions for you, or like if you feel like you need someone to talk to while you're walking down some alley that I'm going to push you to do it, because I really think everyone should do this at least for a year of their life. I think everyone should experience this.
And just solo travel, period. I think,
Yes,
just a whole nother perspective.
You don't even have to be a nomad or an expat. You can just decide to go somewhere for a week solo. And I mean, I feel like a lot more people are working remotely now. So even if you took a month off, that's still good. And that can give you a taste of, and I'm pretty sure if you get a month off, you're going to get the taste of this life and you're going to feel much lighter. And you're going to want to chase that life for sure.
And I think this is a good question. And I think this is important, especially for people who are becoming more health conscious, because it's a lot harder to be health conscious here in the States.
Yes.
I mean, depending on where you're at, where you're from. So this was a good question. Is the food culture more vegetarian there? And I'm guessing she might be talking about Vietnam or maybe Argentina. You'll have to tell us which there you're talking about.
Well, I can definitely share this. So I'm not a vegetarian, However, in Vietnam, I think that is the first time I was around a lot of vegetarians in my life. Like I've never met so many vegetarians until I went to Vietnam. And people who are into astrology, like they are all concentrated in that area. And so there are a lot of vegan, vegetarian options. I saw it in Vietnam. And I'm in Argentina, which is like steak capital of like
Beef.
they're known,
All the
they have more cows than people, right? But there's a lot of one of my friends here, she's vegetarian and she figures it out. Like there's a lot of options for her to choose from.
Oh, I love it. This is a good question. She says, what about banking and switching currency? And then in terms of like finding a place to stay, how do you go about that as well?
So this is the difference between being a nomad and an expat. When you are an expat, you are going to want to have a banking because like there's a lot of things that I'm not able to do in Argentina. Okay, this is not specifically banking, but because I don't have like a specific like 6-digit identification number, so there's countries that also have that set up with like finances. I think Vietnam had that, which I did end up getting a bank account with Vietnam because I just realized there were a lot of things that I don't even remember what it was, but I guess I figured I was going to be there long enough. Let me just get, and it was pretty easy. So you would have to like figure out each country how that works. Everyone is different. Like each country is different. But if you're an expat, there's certainly a way for you to get a bank account set up, especially if you're a legit expat where you have the specific visa. They're going to make it easy for you to bank within the company. Now, in terms of finding a place to live, this is the difference. So a lot of countries, if you're an expat, obviously you're going to be there for who knows how long, like years, maybe forever. So you're looking at renting an apartment for a year. So it's going to be easy for you to find an apartment and getting a lease. Argentina is a special case though. Like I won't even like trying to navigate the way this works is giving me a headache. So I don't even know. But like the other countries I lived in, like when I was in Panama, it was pretty easy for me to rent out an apartment for a year. Um, but if you're a nomad and you know you only want to stay someplace for 3 months, it's harder because a lot of the like owners aren't going to want to rent out an apartment to someone who's only going to be there 3 months. And also, in case anyone like a lot of the apartments are furnished, so you don't have to worry about like looking for a new bed, couches, television. They do have a lot of the rentals geared towards expats or even longer term nomads where everything is furnished. So all you really need is like, food, or if you know you're going to stay there a year, maybe just things that you want to kind of make that place feel like home.
So that's perfect. That's a good. So Airbnb might be a good option for you. So we got Florida, New York, Chicago. Come on now, y'all ain't mentioning no places that are free of crime.
Right. Right? Chicago, New York, for real. I want to mention something too. I'm assuming everyone on this call is, melanated. One thing I had to learn is a lot of oftentimes when you go, so this is mostly in Latin America. Asia, there wasn't really like in Vietnam, I could only really speak to Vietnam where they were like, this neighborhood is a bad neighborhood, right? For the most part, if you're in the city, everything is relatively safe. You just have to have common sense or whatever. But I learned that in Latin America, there are places where people would say it's like a bad neighborhood, right? They'll say it's dangerous, whatever. But what I'm learning is when they say bad neighborhood, all it means is the people are closer in color to me. And then
Which is it's very much like here because the
right,
everyone's like y'all know you want to be there and yeah.
right. I just feel like I'm in part of the Brooklyn that's not gentrified. It's not dangerous at all. So when you're looking at neighborhoods, a lot of people who aren't used to living in certain like parts of like NYC, like where a lot of Black folk live or whatever, they're just automatically going to say it's a dangerous neighborhood. It's not. Like, there is a part in Argentina that I kept hearing was a dangerous. I would look online, they would say it's dangerous, high crime, whatever, whatever. And then I spoke to this girl, and I was telling her, I mentioned it, but I heard it was dangerous. She's like, it's not dangerous. And she's from Chicago. And once the way she said it, I knew exactly what it was. I was like, oh, it's basically where the dark people live. Right. Right. And it's not dangerous. I walk through it, it's fine. There's no issues. So you want to take that into consideration too. Like, you want to take that into consideration when you're looking into places to live, because I'm sure a lot of people have heard about the talks of how I want to say it's digital nomads specifically are considered like colonizers because they're going to neighborhoods and, you know, the rent is going up, specifically in Mexico City. I'm hearing a lot of that happening. In fact, Mexico City was one of the cities that was on my radar, but I decided not to go because I'm seeing a lot of the Mexicans are like not happy with people like moving there. And
The irony.
right. For me, I wasn't going to be in Mexico City for like years, but I was going to stay 2-3 months or whatever and leave. But the Mexicans are in the forums and the groups, and they're like, yeah, you're the reason why XYZ is expensive. And I'm like, damn. So I think when you're looking for a place to live, you want to be cognizant of like what your footprint and how it's going to affect the communities that you're going to. So yes, I can go to Mexico City, but I already see that they don't appreciate the digital nomad lifestyle there. So it's like, all right, I'm probably not going to go there. Now, if I did decide to go to Mexico City anyway, I would really just I would want to be mindful, like, okay, so if I can afford, example. So when I was in Panama, my rent was comparable to the rent that I was paying in the States, right? But when I was in the States, I only had a 1-bedroom for that amount. But in Panama, I had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-bedroom, like loft style apartment overlooking the ocean. Like,
Oh
the
wow.
Trump Tower was like right outside my window. Like, I was living high on the hot, like
Nice.
So, but Panama is different because I feel like Panama is considered expensive because of that. Because in Vietnam, I probably would have had a similar apartment for like $600, $700. Because I had a beachfront apartment in Vietnam for like $500.
Oh
So
wow.
like, I learned this like through reading and like talking to other expats who are trying to be more responsible and like ethical in terms of how they're integrating into communities. It's like, if you can afford $2,000 for an apartment and have like a mansion, you got to think about how is that affecting the other people that are living around you. So I think a way to kind of go around that is if you're comfortable living in a neighborhood that is deemed um, deemed dangerous, but it really isn't, then maybe you can, and then you're living amongst the like the local people as opposed to living in like the central part of the neighborhood when everything is sky high because of it. And then you also want to learn the language. I try to volunteer when I can. You know, you want to just be like, you want to leave a good vibe in terms of like, yes, I'm a nomad, but I do care about where I'm living. I liken it to like people who move to Harlem from like Midwest, and they're like, oh, it's too noisy, and they want to complain and shut down block parties and all that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And like in Vietnam, karaoke is a thing, and it could be 2 o'clock in the morning and you won't be able to sleep because karaoke is like
They
loud.
getting their karaoke on. Yeah.
Right. And I see expats complaining about that. And I'm like, you can't do like this. You
You
chose to
came
live here.
here.
You
Yeah.
can't just come and change the landscape, the social landscape of a place because you don't like it. Because if you don't like it, you don't got to go home, but you can get the hell on and go to another country. So those are the kinds of things that I try to make it a point of not being the obnoxious digital nomad person. So yeah, that goes into like where you decide to live too.
Now, I like this comment. Somebody says, I have my own firm and I want to do it. She's never traveled outside the US and she's over
Mm.
50. She already works
Mm.
from home and works virtual. And I know you said this was like 10 years in the making. How was
Mhm.
your progression from idea to like getting to where this person is and saying, okay, all right, I'm finally gonna leave? Like, how was that progression? What were kind of some of the triggers to say, all right, it's definitely time?
For me, I think what really made me pull the trigger at some point, because when I left, I was 36. Yeah. I think I left when I was or just turning 36. And I've wanted to leave for 10 years at that point. And I kept like thinking, you can leave. Like, what's holding you back? You're not married, you don't have kids. Like, what's the big deal? Just go. And if it doesn't work out, you can always come back. So, what allowed me to kind of do it, I kept telling myself, if it doesn't work out, I can always come back. So that's why I just decided to just go and do it. So the trigger for me was like turning 36 and like realizing you're clearly not finding anyone you want to marry. And then I was trying to like date with the intention of trying to get someone to go with me because I figured, oh, if I had like a partner in crime, it would be
It would
easier.
be easier and yeah.
No one wanted to leave. And I'm like, this I'm just gonna go, right? So, and then that's why I kind of just like left.
See, and Dee makes a good point. She's living in Mexico City, and all her friends back in DC and Philly are still tripping about whether you say, "Girl, I'm in DC," and I'm like, "Who got shot today?" Like, yeah,
Right? Yeah,
craziness.
yeah. So many times that when I was traveling, like even before I left, be safe, be safe. But then when you're away, you're hearing about all the atrocities that I'm not gonna, all
Yeah,
the things that happen in the U.S. And you're like, but it's okay over here. So yeah, don't let if you're afraid because you think you're going to be kidnapped or anything like that. How I was having this discussion with someone. How often do you hear on the news an American woman is being kidnapped overseas compared to how many times have you heard of an American woman being shot by her boyfriend or whatever? Like it just doesn't compare. So don't let that be like, don't be afraid of, that's not to say it doesn't happen, but I don't think that that shouldn't be a reason to hold you back because um, I've been doing this for 4 years now and I haven't come across that. There was one woman who kind of like disappeared where she wasn't on social media and we thought something happened to her because her family came to us in the group, hey, have you heard from this person? And no one could find her, so we're like trying to find this woman and she really just wanted to be off the grid. So that was like my only brush with like the idea of someone being kidnapped, and it wasn't even the case
so
after
maybe
all.
you got to tell if you want to be off the grid, you got to tell somebody. I
Yes,
need to
if
just
you want to be off the grid, make sure someone knows that you're being off the grid because we were like 10 seconds from hitting up the embassy. We didn't know, and we didn't even know this one, but her family was coming to us like, where is she? Where is she? So, yeah.
But I think in this day with technology, with the phone calls, the emails, all the dings and whistles and all that, I would love to just cut it all off and be like, I do not disturb is my best friend. I
Mhm.
absolutely love it. Now, this is a good question. I know this always comes up in terms of like the way that people do research. So you mentioned some groups. How are you connecting with other expats and other digital nomads and so forth along your journey?
So that's an interesting question because when I first started this, I didn't even know these groups existed. I would, and then I also like I would travel solo, but I wasn't really big on like forming a community because to me I wasn't going to be there long, and I just like being in my own world. Like I have conversations with myself, so I don't really need, you know. But then when I went to Vietnam, I saw that there was. I think I was like searching online for like Vietnam Black, like trying to see what that what the Black community, expat community was like. And then I found this girl who's been living there. And she had a group called, I don't know, brothers and sisters of something like that, of Vietnam or Da Nang. And that was like my first intro into like a group experience in terms of people all from wherever they're from communicating online and sharing their experience or asking questions. And then from that group, that's when I was able to find out that there was like a whole huge group. If you go on Facebook and just Google Black expats, you'll find there's like, I'm in like 3 or 4. And you can message me, I can send you the link or whatever. And there you'll find, so there's people who haven't left yet. So they're in the phase that you're in now where you're thinking about moving and you're not sure which country you want to go to, or you have a fear. So there's people like that in the group, and there's people that have already left, like myself, answering those questions, or maybe even finding out other places they would like to live. So all of that, you can get that information within the group.
I think that's really good. And Dee has, she said she's had some of those same conversations when you talk about expenses and gentrification in Mexico City. And
Mm-hmm.
so some of the residents have their own perspective, but she said she hasn't seen a lot of hostility. So I think that's good. But that might be, based on the way that you come across too. The difference in coming in and expecting them to change versus coming in and really embracing things. So
not learning Spanish. Apparently that's a thing, which I'm shocked about. Like where people just refuse. They're like, I'm not going to learn Spanish. I don't know. I'm not a pro in Spanish, but I think it's also a thing. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? You have to be comfortable with making mistakes. So like my Spanish isn't great, but I can communicate where the person can understand me, and we can, I'm not going to go to someone's home and make them uncomfortable to speak Spanish when that's not their native language. So that's another way in terms of like, you want to be responsible in terms of being a nomad, where you're extending yourself and making someone comfortable in their own home. So trying to learn as much as the language as you can.
Just trying. Yeah. I mean, I think
all is, and this is a rule that I had with myself, is like, I just need to know, I just want to represent myself as someone who has manners. Like I just want to know how to say good morning, thank you, and do you know how to speak English, right? I don't want to go up to someone. I actually find that to be incredibly rude. I've seen people do it before where they just go up to someone and just start speaking English, not even knowing if the person speaks English or not. Like, at least ask. If you know how to say, do you know how to speak English in whatever language the country you're in?
Things that you like to eat. I mean, I think that's important. If you like chicken, beef, some kind of vegetables, like, okay, those are some basic words, a couple of breakfast foods. Know how to say coffee, water, like it's some very basic things.
Numbers when you go to right, exactly. Just the basics.
Just some basics. And I think this is a good point from Lack of Legacy. She talks about she's in Ubud right now, and she lives at an in-home stay. And I think sometimes people just think, oh, I got to do an Airbnb or I got to do something. But there's so many different ways that you can find and coordinate housing. And some might be in some of the local groups where they can introduce you to someone, or someone can host you. And it might be just the thing to allow you to kind of get an adjustment and see, do I like this place? So before I put down roots, you might want to buy another plane ticket and get on a bottom there, or whatever it might be.
That's a good point. So for me, I've just done Airbnb. And I have also, like when I was in Vietnam, I worked it out where, because you can just walk around and see when people, I don't remember the Vietnamese word for it, but at the time I knew what it was when I saw it. And you can see when someone has an apartment available. You can just kind of walk up and knock on a door and make that happen. But there are other, I've come across people. So like with what you're doing in Ubud, I've seen people where they don't even pay for their lodging. They go to hostels and they work. So they get to stay in the hostel for free. And they were like serving breakfast to the guests. She's a guest, but she's doing breakfast service, making drinks, cleaning up, and then that's how they get to live in whatever city they're in and not have to pay lodging. So a lot of people do that. There's this website where it's called, what is it called? So the premise is you're house sitting. I think it's called house sitting.
House sitters. Yeah.
I want to do that. Like,
I've
But
done it before.
I think I want to do that. But the thing is, I'm not really a pet person.
See, I am a
I
dog
listen,
lover.
even though I'm not a pet person, I have dogs sat and cat sat before, like several times, but I'm doing it for a friend, right? So it's like I want to make sure I can do it, but I already knew the animal, right? So like just going, I knew the pet, just going, just like, hey, I'm gonna watch you for a week, but I never like got comfortable with you. I don't know if I could do that.
I found it to be okay. I mean, most dogs they're in their own home, so they're adjusted pretty nicely, and they're just like, "Oh, you here? Okay, you feed me? Okay." And I've dogs that older dogs too, so they actually the instructions were do not walk. So we literally just eat and watch TV. So I mean,
We'll probably connect with that because I do want to do it, especially like if I decide to make Argentina my home base and I want to travel, I don't want to keep like that's what's like annoying to me is like going away, basically paying rent for two different cities.
yeah.
It's annoying. Right.
I have to
And I
send you I have to send you the link if y'all interested. I'll send y'all my
yes. Yes.
referral link so y'all can go
Yes,
ahead and
please,
get your
please, 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 please.
house.
I do want to try it.
And that's a good point, because we talked about kind of ways that you can do it, ways that you can plan, getting out of the fear. So now if somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they reach you?
So you can, if you're on Instagram, my name on Instagram is Lady Sips the Booze. Um, yeah, Lady
With the
Sips the
S.
Booze.
Because I did it without the S first.
Oh, Sips, yeah, Sips the Booze. You can find me on Facebook, and my name is Daphnée Marie Joseph on Facebook. But I think Instagram would be better. And then that same name at Gmail, if you want to shoot me an email, that's fine too.
So I think that's perfect because it's scary. I mean, I think my first solo trip, if it wasn't like my thing happened by chance, and if it wasn't for like I found a really cheap ticket somewhere and my travel friend could no longer go, so it was like, do I give up my ticket or do I go by myself? So I was kind of
Ah,
forced out there. And once you do it, it's like this ain't bad. I gotta ask somebody where you want to go eat. I can go eat. I ain't gotta. I can be like, I'm gonna take a nap at 2 o'clock and go to dinner. Like I can just. You can move
do
at your
your
own
own thing.
pace. And if you want to see people, you can say you can jump in a Facebook group and say anybody in the city want to have drinks, want to have dinner. You could go on a tour. Like you can have enough people as you want to, and then some just
Or
decompress.
not.
Yeah.
Right. It's funny you say that. So I took my first solo trip was Costa Rica. Um, my Spanish was nothing compared to even though like okay, so if that was like I think it was like 12 years ago. It was a no, maybe 15. It was a long time ago. And this was before like Facebook was really a thing where you can it was mostly like college, I think. It wasn't really as communal where everyone you can go on like there were no Facebook groups. There wasn't even like Google Translate. I just had to like make my and there wasn't even maps, but I figured it out. But in terms of like why I started solo traveling, I traveled with friends, ex-friends now, and it was I spent most of the trip alone, and I was like, if I could spend my time alone, then I can like travel alone. So that I thanked them for that because I was able to like realize that I can travel alone, and it got addictive.
I think that's a good first step. So for anybody who's like on the fence, like I don't know if I can do this, just
Solo,
take your little week away just by yourself.
right?
Enjoy, plan your day out, and don't plan your day out. Just kind of roam around, enjoy some life, and see how it is. And get I was reading a book. It said people are afraid to be with their own thoughts.
Mm,
And so
those are
really
my
to
thoughts.
just. So I was like, girl, you
Sometimes I'm like, I, do I go out to dinner with someone? But then it's like, but my thoughts are so much better,
just to
especially if
be,
I take an edible. I'm just saying.
yeah. just to be.
But yes, you have to be okay with your thoughts. Yes, yes. And if you're going to like live out of the country on your own, you're going to have friends at some point. So you need to be okay with being out on your own, because how are you going to meet them if you don't even want to leave your step foot out the house alone? So yeah.
I think that's good advice. Any other advice? I know we're right at the 8 o'clock mark. Any other advice, thoughts for people who are like, I'm thinking I want to, but I don't know?
So this is kind of a pivot, right? So yes, I left because I left corporate America to kind of, and I still was doing corporate work when I left. But one of the things that I stumbled across that I was not expecting to find was the number of creatives that left to pursue their passion, right? So if you think about, in the US, you've heard the term starving artists, right? So they're busting tables just so they can be a waitress or a model. They're taking odd jobs, barely making ends meet, but they're trying to pursue their passion. So if you have a passion, like let's say you're a singer and you have no way to really make it work in the US because you need to like have that corporate job that you have, you can easily just go. I've met so many women and men that have pursued whatever their passions are, from modeling, acting, singing, painting, comedian, like being a comedian, all these things. They're doing it and they're not having to like struggle to make ends meet, because where they're living is like a lower cost of living. And I think that's another way that you're enriching the community that you're going to, because you're sharing your gifts with them. And that's actually, like, in terms of where I see myself living, I want to be around where the creatives are. I don't want to be around the people who are like, I mean, I'm a low-key creative, but I haven't really tapped into it like that. But I'm so inspired by the people that travel, that move to another country to pursue whatever their passions are, their gifts are, from singing to painting or whatever. So you might decide you want to leave and you want to work remotely, but if you know you're a painter or you're an artist or some way, I went to someone's first this gallery opening where they had their art exhibit on display. And they may not have been able to do that in the US, but I thought that was incredible. So that's another avenue you can look into when you decide, if you decide to take the leap, not if, when you decide to take the leap to go to another country. Like, what are some things that you were not able to do in the US because the pressure of trying to make ends meet when the rent is so damn high that you can't even give yourself the space to breathe, to like tap into that creative side.
I think
So
that's a word in and of itself. I think that
Mhm.
addresses the fear, how do you know when? Especially, I think a lot of people, if you're seeing life changes or post COVID, people really start to, think about what's important. And they're
Mhm.
like, oh my
Yes.
God, the world can shut down at any point in time. A lot
Right.
of people lost family members during that time. And it just puts life into perspective a little bit more.
Mhm.
So, if you're still on the fence,
The
contact.
question, I think the question you should ask yourself: if it doesn't work out, can I come back? So if you know you could come back because your sister would let you crash on her couch, or your mother would let you hang out in the basement to get yourself back to the life that you had, or if you have savings that it's easy for you to come back, or if you even have a rental, because a lot of people have that where they have property and you know that you could not renew your tenant's lease just so you can move back. If that When you ask yourself that question and you know that there's a way for you to come back, then just go, because if it doesn't work out, you can always come back, and then that'll just be an experience that you have to talk about to, I don't know, grandkids, grandnieces, whatever.
I love it.
You can
She
always
says
come
she
back.
in
Just
Mexico
do it.
City painting. Girl, you got to send us some of your paintings so we can cheer you on and support you and
Yes,
share
and
those with
my
other
plan
people.
is to message me please on Instagram, because my plan is to come to Mexico City in October. I want to do del Muerto this year, so hopefully. And I like painting too, but I haven't. Not
See,
as,
and this
that's like my fear.
is
So yeah, message me.
I love it. So thank you so much for being here with
You're
us today, Daphnée.
welcome.
And thank
You're
you all for joining us as well. If you're on the fence, figure out where that fear is coming from and
right.
address it
And
head
if you
on.
need me to talk some life into you to let you know that you can do it, because you can do it, don't hesitate to hit me up. I have no problem answering questions.
I love it. Until next time, I'll see y'all soon.
Bye, guys. Thanks. Thanks so much for having me.